Every time I plug a battery in, I get the same nerves. I get the same shakes that, I did at my first ever comp.
Welcome back to RC Truck Talk. Joining me today is William Riddle, an experienced competitive driver who is no stranger to the podium. So if you have issues driving under the pressure of competition and you would like to improve as a driver, then this is the episode for you. So let's get going. Hi, Bill. Well, thank you very much for sparing this time for this interview tonight.
You're welcome, sir.
Okay. If I may, I'd like to start off with something we all like to talk about, and that's new truck builds. In particular, I'd like to talk to you about your Meet the Dragons builds that you featured in your video.
Okay.
For some of the people that might not have seen that video, could you explain a little bit about the process that went into those?
Yeah. So when I started, I had never built a comp chassis truck. And I knew that if I wanted to compete in all three classes, I wanted to have very similar, at least as much as I could, if not identical trucks.
Right.
So did my own little bit of research. So everybody has an opinion on chassis. What's the best? What's buildable? What's not buildable? So ultimately, I settled on a G-Speed chassis, and I got what they call a V1C1 for Class 1, which it has a certain amount of skid lean in it that's allowed within the rules. And I don't know what that is off the top of my head. I don't remember. And then I got their carbon fiber chassis for Class 2 and Class 3.
Right.
And kind of went from there. So identical chassis, identical components, identical axles across all three platforms, same wheels, same winches, same servos, same everything. And my concept was if I had traveled to an event, I don't want to have to take parts for three different varieties of truck.
Right. Yes.
I don't want to have to, to mix and match and then possibly forget something, leave something, not have something. So I take three trucks that are built identical. I've got one set of parts that I can basically fix any truck with. And then the other thing is I wanted to be able to, because some of these comps, you'll run all 2-3 classes in the same day. Some of them are spaced out to where, you kind of have your pick or variety. But I wanted to be able to transition from one truck to the next truck in a different class and have it respond the same. The lean is the same, the bounce is the same. So I just took and built basically 3 mirrored trucks, one for each class.
Okay. I mean, that's the first time I've heard of someone doing that. Is that unusual, or do you see other people doing that as well?
I've never seen anybody do it in all three classes at the same time. Over time, as guys compete and they drive their trucks, they, find components that they like for their style of driving. Mm-hmm. And they'll, maybe one year have a new truck and then the next year have a new truck with the same components. But I was getting into it for my first comp build chassis, or what they call a comp chassis. So I had kind of a clean working slate. I didn't have 5 or 6 other comp trucks laying around. I was comping with basically straight frame rails off of an axial 10-1 or a 10-2 truck for years.
Right.
And, so I had a clean slate. I didn't have anything else laying around. And I talked to a variety of people and watched them and drove some other trucks and picked some components that I thought would work for me. And that's the direction I went in.
Yeah. And I can see the uniformity, how that can benefit for you. I mean, obviously anybody that's ever packed up spares to leave, it's a problem.
Right. It is. It's if you've got any type of RC shop, you've got parts probably scattered everywhere and, 15 different things that you're working on at any one time. And unless you're a guy that travels routinely, trying to pick up and collect those parts could be a pain in the butt.
Right. When you decided on that, did you feel that you needed to compromise on any aspect of those builds in order to accomplish the outcome? I mean, did you feel that your 3 was a compromise on your 1 or vice versa?
No, actually, I didn't. I got components and parts that I believe in. Some of the folks that I used, I drive for or I'm sponsored by. But I only use parts that I believe in. I only use components that I have complete confidence are going to hold up to the way I drive. So I don't think that I sacrificed really anything from one build to the next. Yeah, no, I don't think so.
Yeah, it's something I think you need to experiment with yourself to come to that conclusion, because so many people seem to build, a very specific class 1 and then a very different class 2 and then a very different class 3. From my perspective, when I saw that build, I was very intrigued with that because I thought you have familiarity.
Right.
And that enhances your driving abilities because everything's a little more predictable in how it performs.
And when I started out, that's exactly what I was going for. Like I had no preconceived notions of, hey, I'm going to use this component and this component. My base build plan was, hey, I want 3 identical trucks.
Right.
And ultimately that's what I got. And they do, they're not perfect. They have their little quirks, but they keep me in the top 10 or 20 most days when I'm not screwing them up.
But then I don't think I've ever met anybody that doesn't have a truck that has a quirk.
Right. Like my trucks, like all 3 of them are super loud as far as it's not the motor. I run the hobby wing motor, so it's super quiet, but I run all metal gearing. So, and then it's inside of, a styrene built hard body and then a styrene built custom interior. So it's basically, inside of what are those things called that makes everything louder?
Yeah, so it's like an echo.
Without the body on it, it's actually pretty quiet. But when you put that body on it, it creates a big boom box in there, and it's loud. It's not as loud as some of the motors out there, but they are loud of themselves. But it's something I've gotten used to, and it's not that super whiny, kind of high-pitched loud that some motors have, but it is different, and it makes it sometimes hard to hear, but the trucks do very well for me.
That's awesome. So I think you've answered my next question, is when it comes time to build through 3 new rigs, would you follow the same process or would you try something different?
Absolutely. I would absolutely follow the same process. So, and those builds were for the 21 season. So for the 22 season, I built an additional class 3 truck because my class 3 truck for 21 was on a narrow axle. It was on an AR-45.
Okay.
And there's some serious advantages to that, but it was just a tad bit long as far as the wheelbase for my liking, my driving style. So I actually built 2 new trucks in class 3 for 22. I built another AR-45, which is a little bit more narrow with a little shorter wheelbase. And then I also built a Capra width axle in class 3 for 22. And again, it's the same components. The chassis is the same, the transmission's the same, the transfer case is the same, the motor's the same. The only thing that is different is you have a narrow axle versus a wide axle. And then, so what I'll do is I'll take both of those trucks to a comp with me. And as I'm looking at courses, I'll look and see what the disadvantage or advantage is of running narrow or running a little wider. Because again, they have disadvantages, they both do. So that's my concept for class 3. And hopefully this year I can be a little more competitive in class 3. The 4-wheel steer sometimes gets in my head trying to mix it, but a good buddy of mine, Dave Zettelmoyer, hooked me up to a radio system and said, "Hey, this is what you need." And it's been a game changer for me as far as the class 3 and the 4-wheel steer. So.
It's a huge change for most of us drive normal RC cars.
Right.
The 4-wheel steer is a big departure from that. It's a whole different mindset of what you can do, what's capable of.
It absolutely is, especially and what gets into my head, or what got into my head before I went to a new radio system, was the mixing and whether I was turning the rear wheels in the right direction. A lot of times I'd whack them into a gate when I was trying to turn the other way, and they were slow in the way I had the mix set up. So there's a lot going on with a 4-wheel steer truck, especially if you're in 4-wheel steer and you use it and you're trying to winch. And man, there's a lot of stuff that can happen in those different scenarios, but it definitely keeps the brain busy.
That's like the sort of the pat in the head, rub in the stomach kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. Not that coordinated.
And then problem solving on top of that.
Exactly.
So all these trucks are primarily built for Sorca events.
That's correct. Sorca Light. They're compliant in both realms, because around here where I live in Virginia, there's both Sorca competitions and Sorca Light competitions.
Okay.
So they're built to pass a tech table in either one.
So from that aspect, how did you actually first get into competitive crawling?
Ooh, I guess you would probably have to define competitive, because I would compete with myself a lot, kind of before the community kind of got recognized, I guess. And then soon as, they started kind of happening on the East Coast, I was involved as much as I could be. Sometimes, years ago, traveling was a little more difficult for me. But I guess I've been into competitive crawling for probably off and on for 8 or 9 years, maybe.
Oh, wow.
Something in those ranges, maybe a little longer, maybe a little shorter.
Yeah. So it was something you were always interested in. It's just as the sport expanded, then you just took advantage of what was going on around you, really.
Right. It took me a while to find the crawling community. I've had an RC car since I was like 9 or 10 years old of some form. I did the go fast thing, the racing thing for a few years. It just wasn't my thing.
Right.
I did a little bit of bashing here and there and that type of thing, but it just I wasn't as into it as I am now. And the crawling really intrigues me. I don't have to go fast. I don't have to, make every corner at the right angle. I can go out. There's a set of gates. I got to get through them and move on to the next one.
Yeah.
So it's a good hobby, good sport for me, and I really enjoy it.
Right. And that's the main thing, isn't it, for that?
Right.
You've posted up on your YouTube channel, you've posted up many driving videos. And I know quite a few other RC drivers, myself included, that like to watch these and get quite a lot out of them. But one thing I can't help notice that when you're competing, you are incredibly calm. And I mean, I don't know if that's like that in real life, but from an observer's point of view, you just seem to be very calm, very collected. And even when I've seen like a spotter talking to you and a judge was asking you if something's fallen off your truck and the line wasn't going the way you planned, and you just said, okay, I've got a winch, I've got a set, and you just carried on. And I just wanted to know, is that something you have to work at or something you've developed over time, or is that just you?
Well, I think it's kind of just me from past lives and past careers. You have to be kind of calm. You have to be calm under pressure and under fire. And RC crawling is really no different. It's not always going to work out the way you want it to. And you have to make a decision in just a matter of seconds as to whether you want to go left, right, winch, what you want to do. And, I want to win. I'm an A-type personality guy. I love winning. I love being, on the podium. But at the end of the day, if I lose, it's not a huge, I'm not that grumpy guy that walks around upset and angry all day because, he lost.
Right.
Typically when I lose, it's my own daggone fault because I just tried to do something goofy, or I wasn't paying attention, or I lost my focus. But ultimately, I'm in it to have fun, to clear my brain at 5 or 8 minutes a run, and because when I'm driving, nothing else is going on. I'm in my head. So yeah, I want to win, but I'm not that win at all cost guy. I just want to have fun with it. Win, lose, or draw. Most of the time, I'm laughing and carrying on and having a good time with these guys. And the community here, in Virginia, Maryland, is just like you probably couldn't ask for a better group of guys.
Oh, that's nice. Yes.
From Virginia Scalar to White Rose to Key City, the guys that come into those places, man, they're there for one thing, and that's really just to have fun and laugh, and we pick on each other and all that, and it's a great community of people around here.
Right. I can see how that's a conducive environment to play around in and not get quite so freaked out.
Yeah. I mean, trust me, we have some serious dudes.
Yeah.
But they typically don't stick around long. It's just not everybody's cup of tea.
No, that's true. In my experience, sometimes people like that don't tend to stay in one thing for very long until they they just tend to move on. So
yep.
I know, maybe going back to the videos again, but I found that watching you drive, and often you do like a documentary or critique your own video,
right.
And there's a few things that really stand out to me, and I just thought they're worthy of discussing. The first one that I've seen, that when you're faced with your truck being in a bad position, be it being high centered on the roof or jammed against a rock, many times.
Yeah, thanks for the on the roof reminder there.
Sorry, yeah. And I look at it and I see you persist and often succeed in driving out of the situation. And at some points, I feel that you actually stay on task when a lot of people would have taken like a rollover and moved on. Again, is that a conscious decision, or does it by mistake, or is that a planned thing?
Okay, it's all a little bit of both.
Okay.
But before we get to that, so I want to give a little shout out to, I wasn't the first one to do the commentaries.
Okay.
The guy out in, I want to say he's in Utah, Western Desert Wheeler. He
Yes.
does them as well. And that's where I picked it up. I was like, man, if he's doing them, I can do this, you know, and maybe help out the community. As far as persistence with being in a bad spot, I try to drive one truck something at least 30 or 40 minutes every day, even if it's just around the living room floor, over the wood pile, you know, in the backyard, whatever. I try to get that, you know, even if it's just 15, 20 minutes in.
Right.
So I know my trucks, and I know what they're going to do in most situations. And then I have a little clock in my head that's kind of counting. Okay, you've made one attempt, you've made two attempts, you've made three attempts, you know, you've just eaten up 20, 30 seconds. How close are you to? So there's all kinds of calculations going on. Is this gate 9? Is this gate 1? You know, where are you at in the grand scheme of whether it's a 5-minute time limit, whether it's 8 minutes or 10 minutes? Kind of all of those things come into play as to how long I will sit and try to take an obstacle. And I was up at Key City earlier this week, and AJ and I were talking, and AJ's the owner, and he's like, so why did you just sit there and try to do that? And I was practicing, but I was like, well, you know, I have a clock in my head. And we had this kind of the same discussion.
Yes,
how long do you sit and try to work something out before you move on or decide to take the roll or the winch or, you know, whatever situation you're in.
Right.
But the big piece is I know my trucks. I know pretty much what they're going to do and when. I know where my tipping points are. So, but yeah, there's a whole bunch of calculations going on at any one time in my in my little brain.
It's impressive. I'm glad you said that, because that's what it seemed to, because I figured you have that confidence to stay with it. Right. You know, I've seen you in one situation, you were beautifully high centered on a 4x4 and both your wheels, both fronts, and it's like you started spinning your wheels, and I thought, oh, good luck with that. And then next minute I look, you're up and running again. And it's like, holy smoke, you know, that was impressive.
So I wouldn't do this podcast justice if I didn't mention that there's a history with being high centered on. My first experience was a curb, so like a parking curb.
Right.
And the man that typically reminds me of such events is Jeremy Kilborn, a real good friend of mine with Operation 11 Charlie, lives up in Maryland. And so being high centered cost me a championship at Motorama. Not once, but twice, 2 different classes. And so that one, the high centered piece, there's not too many people that aren't aware of it. And they, every time they see it happen, they're, you know, hashtagging curb or shouting Kirby or, you know, whatever. But again, just, you know, busting my hump with it. But so, yeah, there is a story with you know, stuff on the curb or high centered.
The other thing I picked up on is often if you're faced with an awkward gate or an approach angle, you often use some very creative winching, more than most. I mean, some people will go direct, but you will quite happily loop your winch lines round. So is this something you practice again? Because that looks like it's just not I wouldn't say what you do is instinctive. It looks like it's deliberate, though.
So that's called super winching.
Okay.
And a lot of places, a lot of comps, it's outlawed. You have to go direct from your bumper to your winch point.
Oh.
But at most, and that's, again, so the SORCA rule base allows individual event holders to change things. In a regular SORCA event, you can super winch all day long. But basically, you're taking your winch, you're running it through some position or piece on your truck to pull your truck sideways, get a set of wheels up off the ground. And it is something I practice. And because I'm comfortable with it, it comes fairly natural. And that's something that I'll look at. I'll watch other drivers drive if I have the opportunity. And if they are screwing up a gate, or if somebody says, man, that gate's nasty, then I'll go and take a look at it. And if it's something, again, if I can do it pretty quickly without running the risk of timing out or DNFing, then I'll take a shot at super winching. But again, it is something I practice.
Right. That's reassuring. That's instinctive.
You almost have to practice, even if you're just going to straight winch. Right. It's something you have to practice because, you see guys fiddling with their radio, trying to either turn their winch on or figure out remember what channel it's on. If you're going to be at the top, like if you watch, some of these guys from out west, like Ryan Rodriguez comes to my head right now, and some of his guys out there, Bryce Monta from TGH. Man, these guys, if you think I'm instinctive, they make me look like a toddler. I mean, they're so good at what they do. But if you want to get up and compete with those guys, you have to practice.
Right. No, it's one of those things, isn't it? YouTube doesn't show that side of life, does it? Sometimes.
No, and YouTube doesn't always do some of these angles and rock faces justice.
No, that's true.
It's tough to reproduce that from the point of a camera versus the point of actually being there and see it.
Yeah, the camera has a horrible habit of flattening everything out, and you get no sense of gradient or
you're like, oh, I can do that, and then all of a sudden, you find yourself back on your top.
You go, oh,
yeah.
The other thing I picked up on is your line choice when it comes to gates. You often choose a different line that is different than, say, the common line being taken by most drivers. So like in a competition, you see several drivers take one way and you come up and you go, nope, and you're going to go a different route or take a different approach to it. That's I find that interesting in as much as that, a lot of times if you watch anything, any sport, if everybody takes the same line, there's a tendency to all take that same line. But you're obviously very happy or very confident in picking your own route on that.
Yeah, so the thing there is so when I'm running in a comp event, I'm not just looking at the gate that I'm physically going through at that particular moment. I'm looking at the next gate and where I have to be to get through that gate as square as I can. So if I could take a little different line on a gate to put myself in a better position for the next gate, then I'm going to take that different line. And especially if you're on a course that is all natural, sometimes that preferred line will get eaten out just a little bit, or dirt will get dug out to where you don't have grip, or it gets slick in that original line. So you have to have a second line, as course degradation happens. It happens even on man-built courses.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm going through the gate I'm on, but I'm looking at the next gate to see how I can best set myself up for success there.
Okay, that would make sense. So you're just taking a much bigger picture than just from the single gate. So when you post up a lot of your competition runs, as I said, there's quite a few people I know that use them for their own education and understanding. Do you use them for the same purpose yourself?
Yes, absolutely. So, and I would encourage everybody to, as best they can, videotape their runs or videotape your practice. Because then, a Friday night or a Saturday night while you're sitting in the house, you're having your favorite adult beverage of choice, you can go back and look and put in a little more focus as to, hey, what is my truck doing? Is my truck sitting level? Is my truck riding high on one side? Is my truck, appear unbalanced? Is it turning? Because you don't always see those things when you're actually driving. So when you come back, and that's part of the process of how I get to know my truck. I just watch the videos and then I edit them. And a lot of times I do both at the same time because editing, as you know, editing is a pain in the butt.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
So if I can kill two birds with one stone there, I will. But it's all about, I absolutely use them for my own purposes and to get better.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, also in competition, your perspective could be different too. You know, you're looking down, and if someone
Right.
gets video from the side, it looks completely different.
Oh,
You know,
absolutely.
you know.
And I've done a couple of those. So one of the local comps here, Virginia Scalar, a buddy of mine, I had my helmet cam on and he's videoing from the side. So I got two different perspectives of a pretty difficult gate that guys had not done very well all day. And I completely, flipped the script on it. It took me a couple of minutes, but it was a steep incline up and everybody was trying to go forward through it. And then they weren't able to make the turn to the next gate at the top. So I backed through the gate and it put my front end. Like I said, it took me probably about 2 minutes to clear one gate, but I did it successfully. And it was one or two reverses, maybe three, where other guys were either hitting the gate or winching and hitting the gate.
Jeez.
So I don't always take that orthodox line, and I definitely use my film to make myself a little better.
Okay. So you've said you've been doing it for a long time. So you're a seasoned competitor and you're not a stranger to the podium either. So what skill sets would you recommend that could make someone a better driver?
As far as being familiar with the podium, yes. But every time I plug a battery in, I get the same nerves. I get the same shakes that, I did at my first ever comp. I still get nervous. I just have to kind of calm the internal mechanism. The biggest piece of advice I could give a new competitor, it would probably be twofold. First and foremost, know your truck. Know, what it's going to do, what its capabilities are, what they are not. And then the second piece, and this is something I tell folks quite often, is know your rule set. Yes. Know how a penalty is going to be pointed. Know, what a touch is, how you can use it to your advantage. Know what a reposition is, how to use it to your advantage. And then even more to that is, like I said, up here we have Sorca Light. So you have to know what your rule set is. If I'm not going to get charged for a reverse in Sorca Light and I'm out of position, I'm going to take 20 of them to get myself in the right position. If I'm in Sorca and I'm going to get charged for that reverse, and I'm out of position, I'm probably going to try something a little different or try to just lower the number of reverses that I need to take.
Yeah.
So, good point. Yeah, know your truck and know your rule set.
Yeah.
Where you're going. Ask questions.
That's a good one. Yes. And for drivers new to the competitive scene, other than the actual driving tips, what other advice could you give them?
Yeah, I mean, make friends, watch, get together with folks and practice, get together with folks, take a trail run, drive your truck, have fun, enjoy the hobby. Like I said, it's 99% of the RC community is just fabulous. Amazing. They'll help you. They'll help you with setups. They'll help you with builds. They'll help you. And everybody has an opinion. So you kind of have to,
right,
shake out what opinions are good ones and which ones you could probably do without. But it's a great community. So make some friends, get some buddies, and go into it.
Just have some fun. Yeah.
Yeah, have some fun.
Yeah. Now, am I right in saying that you also design courses?
Yes. So I've been building courses probably past 6, 7, maybe 8 years, different parts of the world. Wow. Where somebody's willing to send me to build a course, I'll go typically help them build a course.
Wow. So what is your thought process when you design a course?
I want to make it challenging. I want to make it, I do not like a clean run. I want to make it challenging for a driver. I don't want a clean run and I don't want a drag race. If I wanted to drag race, I'd go get into RC drag racing. Okay. I want guys to think. I want guys to be challenged by the terrain. I want guys to be challenged by the gates, in a competition. And I want them to, experience a little bit of those nerves and then maybe be able to take a breath and then, go right back to the nerves. Because, it's competition for a reason. But yeah, I want it to be challenging. I do not want a drag race and I do not want a clean run.
Okay. When you design a course, obviously you've got it worked out in your mind how you're going to utilize the terrain or where you're going to your gate placement. Does the outcome match your expectation?
Probably about 50-50. gates because I don't pre-drive anything. I don't pre-run a course. I set it, and I either have a measure stick to get the gate widths correct, or I'll use my fingers. So I don't pre-run anything. So gates that sometimes I think, man, that's going to be tough. That's going to be tough on these guys. It's going to make them work. And then you watch them, and man, they just go right through it. And I'm like, oh. But then at the same time, gates that you think are going to be super easy, like, hey, there's a gate he can take a breath on. Those are the gates that kick him in the butt. So probably 50-50 with that.
That's honest. I mean, that is the way things go sometimes. It's the little things sometimes that can snag you. Yeah. So you've built courses overseas, you say?
Yes, I went down with part of Recon G6, and we did an event pre-COVID in Costa Rica.
Oh, wow.
So we went down there, hooked up with a local group, and Pitbull got with us, and we had a farm, and they had a lot of it done. They had some just incredible courses down there already, but we went in and massaged a few of them, and like to think we made them better. But yeah, most of them here domestic. That's the only one overseas. Most of them have been here domestic.
Yeah. That's still pretty impressive, though.
Yeah, it's fun. I like doing it. It's a lot of work, but I enjoy doing it, and it puts a smile on my face for some goofy reason.
No, I can understand that. Now, you mentioned G6, and I was going to ask you, I know that you're involved in G6. Mm-hmm. So could you give us just a brief overview of what Recon G6 is about?
Okay. So I've been involved with the Recon G6 for about 5 years, 6 years, maybe something like that. I've known Brian and been, working with him. So Recon G6, it's all about the adventure with that. It's not about the gate. The gate is, some of the gates in Recon are going to be 2, 3, 4 feet wide. If you run over a gate in Recon, it's simply because you're not paying attention where you're going.
Okay.
So it's a whole different concept from a competition. Recon G6 is not a competition. It's an adventure. Okay. So there may be, 50 or 100 gates on a particular course. And there may be we go out and do Axial Fest. There's 26 courses, so, wow. But when we do Recon stuff, there's anywhere from, 8 to 10 or 12 courses, and they can be anywhere from 50 to 100 gates. And they're not going to be, it's going to be a little bit of a hike, but the challenge and the adventure with Recon is getting to the gate.
Okay.
The gate is never the obstacle. It's never the challenge. Brian told me a story when he was overseas a few years back. Somebody was like, man, why are your gates 5 or 6 feet wide? I could just drive right through them. And he's like, well, did you have fun getting to the gate? And the guy was like, oh yeah, oh my God, it kicked my ass. So it's two completely different things. And you can cross over from competition to Recon, but the gate in Sorka or in competition is always, chances are, your obstacle. And in Recon, the gate is never the obstacle. It's a trail marker. And it's saying, hey, go that way.
I got you. So it's basically directing someone onto a terrain that you want to choose.
Right. And then, like I said, we may have, a 20-foot uphill, and there's 5 or 6 different lines. We want the guys to try all those different lines. So we're going to put a big gate at the bottom and a big gate at the top. Figure out how you're going to get up the hill. So. And then, like I said, there's a lot of crossover people that do both. I'm a perfect example of that. But Recon is an adventure, 100%. And he's got some cool stuff coming up here this year for 22 that he'll be announcing here pretty shortly. So,
excellent.
He's with it.
Okay. And you touched on the Axel Fest. Now, you were responsible for setting up a lot of those courses at Badlands, right?
Right. So the first year, so Recon for the past, I guess, 3 or 4 years, whatever it's been, has been the main course setters and course builders for the Axial Fest events with Horizon. So we did 1 or 2 in Cali, then they introduced Badlands. And unfortunately for Recon, there was a conflict between Badlands and an event that the Recon has called the Fix Enduro, which is basically a 12-hour event. You take your truck, you drive it for 12 hours over a particular course. You have to do a lap an hour type deal. And it's a super fun event. It's tiring. But anyway, there was a conflict between Badlands and the Fix Enduro. And I had planned to do the Fix that year. Brian had reached out to me and he's like, hey, I need somebody to do Badlands. It's the inaugural year out there. It's the first year they're doing it. We needed to be on point. I have the Fix to do. You're the one that I would like to go to Badlands. So I got my buddy who's also a Recon G6 guy out of California, Mike Dooley, and Craig Davis was there with us that year. And we went in and set 2,600 gates on the Badlands, rock and swamp areas, and had an absolute blast. I mean, and it was tough because it rained. So the swamp was it was tough to walk through the swamp without being up to your ankles in mud.
Oh my gosh.
And if you stepped in the wrong little jelly hole, you could very easily be down to your waist because they run big 1-to-1 trucks in there. Some of these guys are running, 47, 54-inch tires, and they're just having a blast. But
wow.
So, yeah, we went in there, we did it. We pulled off Badlands and the Fix all in the same weekend. And, Craig and Mike really, gave me the support that I needed to go in there and make that event a success. And with those guys, I don't know. Without those guys, I don't think I would have been able to do it. But yeah, it was an awesome experience and an awesome honor to, have Parker say, hey, I need you to go do this.
Yes.
Yeah, it was cool.
That sounds quite. How long did it take you to set all those gates? I mean, that's a lot of work.
Yeah. So the cool thing with Axial is with Axial Fest is we typically have about 3 days on the ground. So we got there for Badlands. We got there on a Sunday. We had a real rough map of where we wanted to be. Parker had been there before. We took Sunday and scouted, and then we basically have a thing we call a gate party. Take your metal rod and you have to put it on every single gate head. And that's what we put in the ground. So we did 2,600 of those. You take the plastic topper and you stick the metal gate on it. So yeah, the next day your hands are all cramped up. But we scouted on Sunday. We had permission to start setting obstacles and things Monday. So we built some obstacles on Monday that were not on the 1-to-1 trails because they kept it open to the 1-to-1 vehicles through Tuesday morning.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
So we got most all of our building done. We knew where we wanted to put some waterfalls and things of that nature, bridges. So we got all that stuff done on Monday and kind of into Tuesday morning. And then when they came in and put the barriers down to keep the 1-to-1 vehicles out on Tuesday, we started setting gates, and we were done setting gates basically Thursday when they opened the concourse up for vehicles to go on it. So 2.5 days.
Yeah.
Something like that. And then kind of the cool thing is we then pulled all of those 2,600 gates in about 6 hours, wow. and what makes that tough is, like I said, people run over them with their RC car, and the gate is supposed to be right there. But then it's 10 feet down the trail because, somebody's run over it and drug it.
Yeah.
But we make it a special point to get all the metal stakes out and things of that nature because we don't want somebody on the 1-to-1 tearing up, puncturing a tire, falling or hurting themselves, anything like that. So we pay a lot of attention to making sure we get those items out.
Yeah. No, I can see that.
Yeah.
Wow, that sounds good. So when you're setting those courses, I mean, that's such a large area. It's not a specific course. You just kind of eyeball it when you get there and just kind of
So again,
improvise. Is that the word?
I guess improvise would be a good word. Sometimes we use game trails. Sometimes we'll use a road or a ditch. It just depends on what's there, and that's one of the reasons that we scout. We know, like with Axial Fest Badlands, they had a part of the area that they had blocked off for us was called the quarry. And that's where Axial was going to have their shuttle bus drop folks off. So a bunch of trails had to start there, and then a bunch of trails had to end there. So that was like the hub of the wagon wheel, if you would. And, you walk those trails. I put in, I want to say 56 miles just walking trails with Badlands the first year because I wanted it to be perfect. I wanted trails to come out where they were supposed to, because Axial had already printed the maps, and some of the trails would kind of follow the map. And then, then we had a couple of mystery trails and a couple of trails went where they weren't really designed to go. So it was a good time. Like I said, a lot of walking, and without Mike and Craig, we wouldn't have pulled it. It wasn't an I thing. We would not have pulled it off.
Wow.
But it was a good time.
I mean, I knew the trails were long. I didn't realize it was that kind of, I suppose, but if you're doing all of them, which is what you were saying pretty much, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what some people come in. That's their goal when they come to Axial Fest is they want to do every trail. Some of them are shorter. Like I want to say it was the Pro Line Trail. It went from right outside the campground all the way to the quarry. Where some other ones, would only take shorter distances, within the area. But so it was a good time, and I enjoyed doing stuff like that. It's a lot of work. You come back sore, and there you're like I said, you're walking in the swamp, and we learned lessons from the first year. So when we went back to do Badlands the second year, we had better foot, better shoes, better boots, things like that, some waders, so we weren't slopping around in the mud for 6-8 hours soaking wet.
Right.
Nobody likes that.
So you pretty much built on the experiences from the previous year. So the courses were similar, or did you try and
So the second year courses, they took different routes, but they were similar.
Yeah.
And then we built we repaired 3 or 4 obstacles that had they sit there in the woods and in that area, and it doesn't take long for ropes to rot and things like that. So we repaired 3 or 4 obstacles, and then we built 4 or 5 new ones, including a tree ball obstacle or a tree root ball obstacle. So basically a storm had come through and taken about a 70 or 80 foot oak tree down, and it just pulled the whole root ball right up out of the ground.
I know. So
we cut up the tree, had them run down the tree, and then built a bridge around the root ball.
Oh, nice.
So, just stuff that you don't see everywhere every day. And so it was definitely different. But, courses were kind of in the same general area.
Right. So, and also, it must be nice because that's quite a departure from like a Sorka course for that of. Yeah.
You got to bring your walking shoes for a Recon or an Axial Fest event.
Wow. You see a lot of drivers do both Sorka and G6.
Mm-hmm.
So when comparing Sorka to Recon G6, how do you see each organization's place within the hobby?
I think there's room for both of them. They're two completely, it's like, a farmer that grows apples and oranges. He's going to sell both. Some people like apples, some people like oranges, some people like both. But Sorka is a rules set. Without the local folks putting on competitions, then Sorka doesn't go anywhere. So like as an event, like take Key City Hobbies up in Frederick. They do Sorka. He's got some other things that he does, but he is Sorka based. So he gets his competitors because they're there to compete in the Sorka rules set.
Okay.
Whereas Recon, which their big one on the East Coast, is Blue Rocks in June. If you've never been to that event, you need to go. It's some of the most beautiful country I've ever seen, and just epic trails. There's trails that go up to the top of the mountain. Just a great time, and a really good RC community that comes in up there. But that's again, that's an adventure. He has very little rules. Politeness, just the basic courtesies, but there's not a rule set. Your truck has to be on this type of chassis. It has to, have this size wheel and tire. It has to have, 2S or 3S or 4S. man, if you've got an RC truck that runs, bring it, and we'll get you in somewhere, and you can go have some fun on the trail.
Okay.
Whereas Sorka, it has to fit. I don't want to say cookie cutter because that's not right, but it has to. In order to compete in Sorka, you have to have a vehicle that fits and passes a tech inspection and fits inside of their box of rules. If you don't, then unfortunately you can't compete with that vehicle in that specific class.
Yeah.
Whereas Recon is, hey, if you've got an RC truck, bring it, and we're going to show you a good time.
Right. So it's a far more sort of open architecture.
It's more of a junkyard, run what you brung type race or type event than Sorka. Where Sorka, if you don't fit in that box, you can't compete with that truck.
Although it sounds like you've got to take in consideration the length of the trails too, because it's just not exactly. you might have some work cut out for yourself, right?
Right. And you've got to be somewhat mobile for a Recon.
Yeah.
Because you're walking through the mountains, you're walking through, swamps and forests and rocks and all that stuff. And typically with a Sorka event, you're pretty close proximity to where your courses are, and the courses are, I don't want to say short, but they're typically 10 gates, and you have anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes, depending on what the event organizer has as a time limit to do that. Right. So it's pretty quick. Those guys at Sorka run, little tiny 750, 550 size batteries, whereas a Recon event, man, you're looking for some of the big 5,000 milliamp batteries, that's going to run for 3 or 4 hours.
Right.
So, two different. I think there's definitely room for both of them to grow and progress, and two different fish there.
Yeah, I get it. So again, in reference to both organizations, moving forward, do you think that they both need to change, and why?
So the things that I think need to change with Sorka is their rule set in the Sorka. There's a committee that works. They do it of their own free time, but there's a Sorka rules committee, and they're in the process of trying to make the rules a little more clear in some aspects. Like in Sorka, there's, like I said, it's a rule set, but there's quite a bit of gray. If you know how to manipulate the gray, then you can manipulate it to your positive advantage.
Okay.
And those guys work really hard, and there's a couple local guys here that are on the committee, and they spend a large portion of a Saturday or Sunday evening, in the chats with the committee members, trying to figure out how can we make this better. So those guys work their tail off, and I think they're going to come out in 23 with a brand new rule set that's going to hopefully clear up some things and make those rules a little more understandable for some folks. As far as Recon, Recon is, he's got a worldwide following of folks, and the pandemic was difficult because you can't travel. It's tough to put on events.
Right.
So he's, like I said, he's got some stuff on for 22, and I think it's going to be a good year for him. I don't think he's going to do quite as many events as he has done in the past, just because it takes, if you're doing an event every weekend somewhere in the world, it takes a toll on you.
Yes.
And so I think he's going to make his events a little, not less Recon-y, but a little, there's not going to be one every weekend.
Right.
I don't think coming up for 22, because a lot of places you can't, you still can't travel to freely.
Right.
So I think there's room for both of them to grow, and I think any change that they make would be positive.
Yeah.
And I think they're both ridiculously good for the community, whether you transition from one to the other, or you just, one is your favorite and that's where you stay. I think they're both wonderful for the RC community.
Yeah. And they sound like they both fulfill very specific needs in the market, and which is
Absolutely.
Nice. So they're not at war with one another at all. And I suppose
not at all.
Brian must have his work. I think, losing, well, I suppose like a lot of organizations lost 2021 for events. It's hard to pick up, when you're building year on year, it's a lot easier to continue. But when you lose a year, then it's harder to go back and get all those wheels churning again, isn't it?
It is. And he lost. So Motorama 2020 was the last event that we did as a Recon. He did some things on the internet and some kind of virtual things, but that was the last event that he has done solely under the Recon banner.
Wow.
Axial Fest, of course.
Yes.
Recon went in and did those, but that was, that's under the Horizon banner.
Right.
So yeah, you're right. It is tough, and it's not been easy on him.
No.
But like I said, he's got a solid plan for some things later on in 22 and into 23. And I think folks are going to enjoy it.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. And I think you could see that people are very, very keen to get back out again. I think everyone's feeling that whole sort of crunch of the COVID and everything else. So right. I think a lot of people are looking forward to those events again.
They are. They absolutely are. And it doesn't matter, where you stand on the spectrum. Everybody wants to try to be as safe as they can in their life.
Right.
With whether it's getting in a car and driving to work, or whether it's, having somebody sneeze on you at the grocery store. Right. Everybody wants to try to be as safe as they can be, for the most part. So,
yeah. So hopefully, it does seem to be, there's a good sort of upswing for 2022 events that are starting to appear and they're holding, they're actually going to, exist, where a lot of people were sort of benchmarking them last year. Then as they got closer to the time, cancelling them, hoping, I suppose, like a lot of people, you're hoping that this is going to work out, and it didn't. So this should be a slightly better year than 2023 should build on that, hopefully. So,
right, hopefully. And, you can't, the government is what it is.
Yeah.
If they want to shut a county or a state down, they're going to do it. And there's no use really trying to battle that, because you're just going to end up with a sore head from knocking it on the side of the barn. So
yeah,
we'll see. Moving. We'll see what the future brings.
That's right. So do you have plans for 2022?
Yes. I have a comp tomorrow. I'm getting ready to charge batteries here in just a little bit. So there's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 set for the year. Wow. Comps that are set right now, mostly here in the East Coast. I will be going to my first nationals event, and that's down in Alabama. So I'm going to go down and, see how I stack up against all the pro guys. And really, my only expectation is that I can hopefully finish all the courses. I don't like taking a DNF. My intent is to go down there and try to finish all the courses and, see where I shake out. Have some laughs. I'm going down with some super shafty drivers, and we're just going to have a good time.
Right. No, I take it that's your first scale national?
It's my first nationals event, yes.
Oh, wow.
So I've done the fall crawl, which is, again, it's a super shafty event up in Maryland.
Right.
Draws hundreds of competitors. I think that should be a national level event, but for whatever reason, it isn't. But I did that, and this will be my third year this year. So the first year I was a little out of my element with my ability in some of the courses. So, and that's what kind of prompted the Dragon builds was, I can hold my own with a frame rail, regular frame rail, and I did so for years. And I got up there, and these guys were just faster, cleaner than I was. So I was like, all right, if you want to compete at this level, it's time for you to step up and put a little, and it's a financial obligation to get some of those components and chassis.
My gosh, yes. Yeah.
So I was like, hey, if you really want to be competitive with these guys, you've got to try to get, a product that is lighter, because you can't compete with a 4-pound truck when you're running a 10-pound truck. It just doesn't work. So that was kind of the part of the reason behind the Dragon builds.
Wow. So that hasn't been that way that's more of a recent, obviously the flat rail chassis have been around for a while, but they haven't been that prominent.
No, the flat rail chassis has been around for years. But I was an axial guy. I was just running that basic C-channel frame or the solid D tube from RC 4-wheel drive. That's what I was running. I was competitive here locally with it, and I was like, why spend all that money to get all that fancy stuff when I can pretty much outdrive you with basically a box stock truck. So, but And then Shafty, when I went up to the fall crawl, it was eye-opening. Guys with just great equipment, great components, smooth, good. Like I said, Ryan and El Jefe and, Squirrel, a guy down here in Carolina, Andrew Flowers, man, some of those guys. If you think I'm calm under pressure, then, like I said, those guys make me look like a damn toddler. Chris Cox, some of those guys.
Wow.
They're just really, really good, steady drivers. And I was like, I can drive with these guys. Let me up my component game, if you will. And that's what I did.
Right.
So the first fall crawl, I had, I think, 3 or 4 DNFs across all 3 classes. And then I was up well over 50th positioning wise. And then this last year with the Dragons, I didn't have any DNFs, which was my personal goal going in. I was like, hey, I want to finish every course. And I want to say I was down into the 20s, into the mid 20s with my finishing places. So I was really, really happy with the way I performed and with the way the trucks did too.
Yeah.
And that'll be my goal again this year, is just I don't want to DNF. Right. I want to finish.
And that, I've only seen it on videos, and like we've both said that, videos tend to flatten out. That looks tough, Super Shafty. Some of the lines on that course are crazy.
It really depends. When AJ's setting courses, if he sometimes he's a little mental. but it's great terrain. It's a lot of kind of West Coast rock, so it's super sticky. Very little of it is super slick, so it's got a ton of grip with it. You just have to be able to pick a smart line, and get through clean. And it's a great time. And again, to me, it's all about the community, man. You go up there, there's vendors and there's food, and everybody's laughing and driving and just having a good time. It's a really quality event in my opinion.
And the field's pretty good too. If you look at the roster on that, you're in some very good company.
Yeah, you've got there's 100 or more drivers in each class. And you've got some of the best names in RC rock crawling. You got Wyatt Mellon, you got Ryan Rodriguez, you got Chris Cock, Andrew Flowers, some of the local guys, like Todd and Dan Plasinski. You got AJ. AJ's a force to be reckoned with. Mom to Bryce that comes out from just the names go on and on that are there. So if you can pull off a top 5, you're doing something. If you can get into the top 20, you're doing something. You're driving with the best guys in the business.
Yeah. Very impressive. It's very impressive. Well, I'm glad the Dragons worked out for you then. So that was
Yep. And like I said, class 1 and class 2, I'm sticking with them. And my class 1, knock on wood, is when the driver shows up, class 1, I'm tough to beat.
Right.
But the driver doesn't always show up. So we'll see what happens tomorrow. But yeah, it's a real good truck for me. I haven't. Yeah. I made a couple tweaks to the class 2, but I haven't done really anything to my class 1. It just and actually AJ borrowed it and drove it at nationals last year. So the truck actually has nationals experience and I do not.
Oh wow.
So he hadn't gotten his quite back together, and he's like, man, I'd like to borrow your truck. And I was like, man, go right ahead.
Nice.
Just make sure you don't lose.
Yeah. Well, maybe some of that will rub off. Now it's got some experience,
Right. It's got more experience than I do at this point.
Yeah. And it'd be interesting to see how the experiment goes with the 2 3s, the 2 class 3s.
Yeah. The second 3 is actually, it's sitting over here to the right of me. The truck is running. I'm just finishing up the body. But yeah, we'll see. Like I said, the driver has to show up. I think the trucks are very capable, but I got to show up and do my part.
I hear you. I hear you on that one. Yeah, that's always that problem, isn't it?
Yeah,
can't tell. You just can't get good help these days. Yeah,
right. It's tough. It's tough.
Well, Bill, you've exhausted all my questions. So, so is there anything that I missed or that you'd like to say?
Just guys, have fun with it, man. It's like I said, there's some guys out there that are win at all costs. I don't like that. I don't care for it. And given the opportunity, most times I'm going to call you on it. But, I lose, I win. And I do it all with the biggest smile I can have on my face around some of the greatest, guys that I've come to know over the last few years. Just have fun with it.
Yeah.
Have fun. Let it take you away from your, whatever crappy, stressful situations you got going on in your life. Plug your battery in. Go drive your RC truck for 15 or 20 minutes and have some fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if you take that attitude with you, you're bound to have a good time, isn't it? If you make it something,
you have to. You have to. If you don't, guys are gonna, like I said, it's a tight community, so guys are gonna start to avoid you. They're gonna know that you're full of drama, and they're not gonna mess up their fun, so that you can have your drama.
I got you. Okay. Alrighty, Bill. Well, I appreciate your time, and I hope you do well tomorrow. And,
I hope I do too. It's actually a series of events. So this is the 4th event in a 5-series string. So we'll see.
Hey, we'll see. Well, I hope you get your batteries charged in time.
I hope I do too.
Alrighty. Well, I would take this. Okay, thank you, and good night, Bill. Okay.
All right, sir.
Now I feel I should plug in a fresh battery, go outside and practice driving over some rocks. Thanks again to Bill Riddle for taking the time to sit down and talk to me. I thought he had some great insights and some really solid advice on how to develop as an RC driver, and I hope everyone got as much out of this interview as I did. For those of you that have not seen any of the videos we mentioned in the interview, you can find them on YouTube. Just type in William Riddle. You can also follow him on Facebook as William Riddle with Bill in brackets. Thank you all so much for listening. Please feel free to reach out to me with your thoughts and comments. You can find us at RC Truck Talk on Facebook, Instagram and Gmail. And as usual, I will do my best to reply to all comments. If you enjoyed this episode, then please recommend us to a friend, and if possible, leave a review. Credits: music by Croanda, audio production by Lee Street Productions. And again, thank you all for listening, and I hope you make some time to get a little dirt on those tires.